Hello, I'm James,
Hi, I'm Jimmy,
and welcome to A Job Done Well.
the podcast that helps you improve your performance and enjoyment at work.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, James. How
I'm
are you?
fabulous. Thank you very much for a Monday. What are we talking about today?
Well, today, James, we are going to talk about high performers.
Okay. There's a touchy conversation if ever there was one.
Oh, yes. And we're going to challenge some of the biggest assumptions we make about high performers. Everyone wants high performers in their team. You've got a team full of high performers,
we have
don't
a
you?
whole industry obsessing about high performers.
Yes. Every company wants more of them. Every manager says that they can spot them and develop them. But if you ask 10 people what makes a high performer, you'll get 10 different answers.
And if you ask 10 people if somebody is a high performer, you'll get 10 different answers as well.
Quite probably. At the end of the day, is it the person who delivers the best results, the numbers on the board?
Is it the person who sits up to the boss best?
Could be. If I'm the boss, it is. Is it the person who gets promoted quickest?
Mm-hmm. Or is it the person who quietly gets on doing things without making a big fuss and song and dance? Not in the places I worked.
But if high performers are so valuable, why, and we'll discuss this point, but why do so many of them create chaos wherever they go? So today we're going to be talking about the myths, misunderstandings and truths about high performers.
So let's start off then, right? Here's a question. What is a high performer? What do you mean by a high performer?
I know I'm massively oversimplifying this. It is about that combination of, do they get outstanding outputs and do they go about doing things the right way? So the how matches the end outcomes. And actually, I think that is a relative rarity.
Yeah, and I have to admit, I struggle with this a little bit. So clearly there are some people who are more capable than others.
Yeah.
So your chief executive, one would hope, is more capable than the person who's emptying the bins. However, we do seem to segment. And if you are a job class 53 or a band 7 or what the hell your organisation calls it, we seem to obsess about segmenting within those bands to find high performance. Whereas really you're looking at a lot of people who are the same. So can you really spot it, would be my question.
Personally, I think so, because I'm back to are they going about it the right way and are they getting results? Now, the problem is, I think there's so much subjectivity in both those statements because often outputs can be quite tangible, but the how is quite subjective. And I remember when we worked together in the insurer and we were having this meeting and it was quite a contentious subject. I was sitting in on another team's meeting, contentious subject, right? And one of the supposed high performers in this team, we'll call them Frank to protect the innocent. Frank didn't like what was happening in the meeting, didn't like the decisions that were being made. So threw his toys out of the drawer, properly had a hissy fit, was quite abusive to other people in the team. Anyhow, so after the meeting, I went up to the guy who was the team leader and said, like, that Frank, unbelievable. What are you going to do about that? And he said, well, Frank, he's really, he's a real high performer. I mean, he wins us so much business and the brokers love him. So you have to take the rough with the smooth with him and just, let him accept some of his fits. I was like, really? That's a high performer? And it was. This guy was the top performer in the team year after year after year. But as soon as he didn't get his way, toys went out of the drawer. That wasn't a high performer for me.
The question is, how do you define how are you measuring high performance? So let me give you an analogy, right? So if you are looking at the fastest 100-meter sprinter, right?
Yeah.
Then you can have a stab at saying who the highest performance is because, it's the person who got over that line the quickest by themselves. Yeah. Even then, it's a bit difficult because was it him? Or was it the person who tied up his shoes? Or was it his nutrition coach? Or was it a whole host of...
Or was it The performance enhancing drugs he took.
Was it his doctor? Yeah, it could be a whole host of things, right? But even with
Yeah.
something as simple as that, it's not quite that straightforward. The problem with most of our businesses is we look for high performance, and it's a bit like driving a lorry. This is good, you're going to like this one. It's a bit like driving a lorry over a rutted field and having a bunch of people inside juggling between themselves. Yeah. And their challenge is to keep the ball up. But then once every 6 months, you open the door and you look in and see who's dropped the ball. And so how are you measuring high performance? Really, I think is so subjective. Well, we tie ourselves in knots about it.
I think another point about a high performance, which touched on at the start, was some people who will be perceived as high performers leave a trail of destruction behind them.
Yeah, because they're very good at managing the message and managing well. We can both, well, I certainly think of one person who was like that. Yeah, did phenomenally well, just left a trail of destruction behind him.
So I think overall, I guess the point around is very subjective judgment, isn't it?
And I think it's driven in part because we have this thing sort of hero culture, don't we? We like the story of the strong man. We like the hero.
We do.
But there was also, here you go, a bit of psychology for you, fundamental attribution error. See if I can remember what this is. But fundamental attribution error is when things go well, we think it was because I, James Order, did a super job. Whereas when things went badly, it was the system and everything that went on around us. So we all think we can spot when things go well, but when it goes badly, wow, it wasn't him, was it?
And I think there's a few other things that organisations get wrong around high performers. Obviously, yes, like you say, the hero culture, but I think we also can reward firefighting as well. Reactivity. So when there's a big problem, fixing the big problem rather than the person who prevents the big problem in the first place.
Yeah. So it's very, very dangerous game.
Just to dwell on it a second. Some of the other things, high performers often are thought to be the people that are most visible.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
The people who grab the spotlight or want the spotlight. And one of the classic things that I've seen in high performers is where high performers clear up their own mess and then claim the glory for clearing up their own mess. I had an example of this recently in a company that I was working with. And again, I'll protect the innocent, but this person had been managing this one business unit and it was underperforming. But they were very good at managing upwards. They were very good at managing their story. They got promoted, right? And they took over the whole of this area and they fixed the team that they had messed up and then claimed a massive success for fixing what they had messed up in the first place. And that takes some skill, to convince people that.
He or she was obviously a high performer in one way. Yeah. But then we sort of see it as a strategy, don't we? What is our strategy for having the best business? Our strategy for having the best business is we are going to recruit and hire the best people and we'll hold on to them, right? So, we both worked in organizations where we talk about bench strength. We need to create bench strength, right? But actually, is that a strategy that is good for a business, right? So if your business relies totally on the quality of the people you've got, well, first of all, how are you going to make sure they don't leave? Because you're into one another wage bill if that's the only lever you've got to make sure that you're maintaining that capability. And secondly, if they do go, does that mean everything else falls apart around them? So as a strategy, I actually think it's quite lazy thinking if you think it's all about the best people and you are kidding yourselves.
If we go back to particularly our early days together, there was definitely the organisation was doing that. It went out and hired the brightest and the best, and the brilliance of the people there could overcome the inadequacies of the ways of doing things. So you were reliant on the individuals, not the system and the process and how things worked around there. And actually worse than that, in one of the teams I was in, all of the first line managers were all graduates, all who wanted to be promoted. Well, there was like 30 odd of them, and there was only like 3 or 4 positions above them. So you had a load of dissatisfaction because they all thought they were the ones that should be getting on because they were all high performers.
So there's a strategy. It's just a bad strategy. I also worked for a while with a Magic Circle firm of lawyers in London. And they had exactly the same attitude. You weren't good enough to become secretary in this organisation unless you got a degree from Oxford or Cambridge. But actually,
Yes.
you're just wasting a whole load of talent and frustrating a load of people doing jobs that they don't want to do. So as a strategy, I think it's nuts.
Also, there's a real entitlement. If you've hired me and I'm the best and I'm the brightest, people believe their own press, don't they?
Yeah, so it just creates a whole load of dissatisfaction when they're not getting what they think that they should be getting. And so there's another problem here as well, right? So if you go and you recruit all your shift managers, whatever the hell it is, from Oxford, then what you've got is a bunch of shift managers from Oxford. But of course, you've got no diversity there. They all see the world the same way. So actually, bring people in from different backgrounds is hugely important. The whole diversity thing is massively important because people see things in different ways.
Absolutely. So, on to the question though, James. High performers, are the people born that way or are they made? Can you develop them? What's your thinking on that?
So, some people are lucky, right? Some people are born with a silver spoon in their mouth. So they have more gifts from birth and they're brought up in places where they're educated. Well, they're sort of a birth lottery. However, I think the trick is not so much are they born, but once you've got people, how do you get the most out of people? So it's not so much are they high performers, but how do you improve their performance? I think that's a much more interesting conversation.
The danger with high performance is that when you get there, you think that's it, that's your entitlement, your work here is done. And so people believe their own press. Whereas actually, I think there are massive impacts, not just on were you born lucky, but also how do you use your experience? So you and I were both lucky. We worked in a number of organizations and we learned a load of stuff. But what set us apart from other people was that fact that we then learned and applied our learnings and kept on trying to improve, where other people, as soon as they got that label of high performer, that was it. They didn't have to learn anything, did they? There is value in experience. There is importance of the system and how the system works, because that can impact high performance, low performance. I mean, we were discussing in the preparation of this episode, one of our former colleagues who would remain nameless, but they had an outstanding year one year because they had an opportunity and they took it with both hands. For a year, they got stellar results. But then the following year, they didn't have that opportunity in front of them. And for a number of years after that, they never recaptured that. So the learning and the experience is important in developing high performers. How the system works is important in developing high performance as well.
So let's just summarize that a little bit. And so the positives of having high performers.
Well, in theory, you're going to get some decent results. You're going to get people promoted potentially. It's going to show to others what potentially you are capable of doing. So, it sets a bar for everyone else to aspire to.
And the negatives? I think for me, the negatives are if you obsess about recruiting high performers, then you probably end up with a load of disenfranchised people because, frankly, you don't need all those high performers. You waste a lot of talent and you waste a lot of enthusiasm. The next thing, I think, which is a negative, is actually, who says they're a high performer? Because if you're only showing people who are high performers who actually they're a high performer because they look remarkably like you and they agree with you and they don't measure your image, that doesn't necessarily make them a high performer.
Or you get the situation where they hit every target and get great numbers like Frank, but they absolutely cause chaos and leave a trail of destruction. That subjective view of what a high performer is, that person's still going to get called a high performer. They're not going to add any value overall to your organisation.
So you get a prima donna syndrome. Yeah. So do you really want a team full of high performers then?
Well, I think you get caught in this theory of every time you get a vacancy, right, you go out and you think that you want a high performer for that vacancy, don't you? You can't help yourself. So I think there's theoretically team managers, organizations, execs, whoever, they think they want a team full of high performers. I think the reality is there are some real downsides to that. So I think that if you end up with a team full of high performers, you can end up with a bunch of egos and prima
Have I ever
donnas.
told you the story of super chicken?
No,
I'm a
go on.
super chicken. So it was a breeding experiment. So it was very easy with chickens. You can tell who the high performing chickens are because they're the ones who
Right.
lay the most eggs. So if you want high
Yeah.
performance, what you do is you breed the chickens, well, obviously the female chickens with the males, but who lay the most eggs. And you run through
Yeah.
that 4 or 5 generations, you can get a breed of high performing chickens. And there's a lovely TED talk who talks about this, but they actually did that, right? They bred them away and they got the flock of high performing chickens. And like all good scientists, they had a control going. So they've got 2 sheds going, yeah? And after about 4 or 5 generations, they went into the control shed and they went in there and there were a bunch of chickens bumbling about as chickens do, and they were laying eggs and quite happy. Went into the other sheds and what they found was half the chickens were dead and the others looked emaciated, and the problem was they just pecked each other to death. Because actually, the whole thing about being high performing as a chicken is you suck up all the resources and bollocks to everybody else. So, when you go for your high performing team, are you just really recruiting a bunch of super chickens? And let's be honest about it, we've all worked for a super chicken or 2 in our career.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, I think high performers, talking about it as the individual, if you end up with people who want the spotlight, they feel that they're entitled to that. I mean, have you ever gone from being a supposed high performer to a lower performer
I have,
at any point in your career?
Oh, well, and it's hard to know this might be to believe. I went from being Mr. Golden Balls to being Mr. Nobody Wants Him on their team within the space of 6 months.
And how did that feel?
It felt dreadful. Talk about demotivational. But actually, the thing is, I haven't changed at all. My boss had changed.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that my performance had changed in any way, shape or form. It was just that the goalposts had moved. So, all that did was piss me off. I ended up leaving the organisation. Now, maybe the organisation was happy that I'd left. There's another story. But there's nothing from motivation at all.
Well, another good example on that motivation thing, James, and again, we'll mention no names, but there have been times when we worked together where we found out who the supposed high performers were in the view of the organisation, and that didn't chime with our experience of them at all. And we found that A, unfair, and B, a number of us ended up leaving on the back of that discovery. And that's the challenge, is not just what the high performers do themselves, it's what the impact they can have on other people. The more you talk about it, James, I think it isn't that you don't want high performers on your team, but I think you can come to the conclusion
You don't want
a team of high performers would be absolute nightmare. So I think that's the thing is, 1 or 2. I mean, it's like your Amazon canoe story.
Okay, so I had a boss, and he put it very nicely once. He said, it's managing a team. It's a bit like a canoe, one of these little dugout canoes going down the Amazon. And he said, in any canoe like that, you've got 2 or 3 people sitting there from paddling away like video. Those are your high performers. And he said, you'll have 2 or 3 people sitting at the back who really can't be asked with their hands treading in the water. But in the middle, you'll have 12 people who are sort of paddling and, putting their back into it, but they're not quite as motivated as they could be. And his point was, well, okay, so the people who aren't paddling at all, you should just get shot of those. But your real challenge is not the people at the front who are paddling. Your real challenge is the people in the middle who could be paddling, but for some reason or not aren't. And so it's not so much about the high-performing individuals in your team. It's about how do you create a high-performing team as a total. That was the real challenge.
Say you had 10 people in your team, whatever the team was doing, if you had 10 people and all were supposedly high performers, and I had a high-performing team, I think my team would outperform yours.
You're right. And there's another side of this, which I think we ought to talk about, which is if you've got high performance, or if you are singling out people as high performers, then by definition, you are also singling out some people as low performers, because you can't have the high performers without the low performers, right? You just can't. And then the issue then becomes, you have a conversation with these people, which is telling them that they're low performers. So you get a whole Pygmalion effect coming in, which is if you tell somebody they're not very good, well, they get disengaged and they become not very good. And it's, a real chicken and egg thing, self-fulfilling prophecy. But telling people they're low performers is really a very bad thing to do for their morale and their motivation and their performance. So in that regard, the challenge for me is how do you get everybody to be working rather than singling out your high performers?
I think it's true, but there are a couple of things that I found were quite useful when managing high performers. Avoiding that entitlement is one of them. So having the right conversations with people about their performance, because otherwise they just turn up every year and expect to get the same high ratings and same plaudits. I think just making sure that actually you focus the development differently on different people. So high performers often need more stretching opportunities. You need to find other things for them to do to keep them occupied, keep them performing well at their core role, but don't just take them out of their core role, because what we often do is we assume that somebody who's technically a high performer is ready for promotion to being the team leader. We've talked about that many times about the danger there. But risk that you have is you still want them to do their core role. So get that balance. But I think your point is as good a one. Yes, there are things you can do to manage high performers, retain them, reward them, stroke their egos, give them challenge, all that sort of stuff. But actually, you want to try and turn that middle group in the canoe into those high performers. So in terms of doing that, James, what are some of the best things that you found to get that middle group paddling faster?
The first thing, right, is don't be blind to your own opinion. Just because you think somebody's a high performer doesn't necessarily mean they're a high performer, right? One man's meat is another man's poison. So I think really be very clear that, your own judgment is probably flawed on this. So I'll just start with that. Then I think the next question is really, well, how do you get people to play to their strengths? We talked about this, right?
Yeah.
But if somebody's really good at something, give them the opportunity to do that and develop at that, because then they will do better and better and better. Right?
And obviously, we've got to have a quick plug for the episode that we did on playing to your strengths with Patricia some time ago, but go back and have a listen to that.
There's also this thing about providing opportunities. Well, you should provide opportunities for your high performers, but you should also provide opportunities for everybody. Yeah. Because everybody can stretch, everybody can do things. So really, it's about how do you develop your entire team rather than just focus on your high performers. And then the other thing, just say thank you and recognize people's performance, because that in its own right will get more out of people. And then the final thing, which I will bang on about forever, is just if somebody's not a high performer, find out what's stopping them and create the environment where they can be. So, for example, for me, I would never be a great salesman. I'm not good at blowing my own trumpet, right?
No.
Don't put me in a bloody sales role. It's very straightforward. Yeah. So it's about finding out what the blockers are and creating that environment where people can do their best work.
Well, I think on that last point, James, I strongly believe that everyone has the potential in them to be a high performer at something. It is just
find the something.
Whether they find the something, and does the system allow them to do that? And so as a manager, I think you've got to be getting to know your team, try and find their something. And if you found their something, is the system enabling them to achieve that? Because we've all got potential. It's just we haven't all had the opportunities to realize that potential. When we talk about high performers, everyone says they want high performers. But as we keep coming back to, it's very subjective.
Well, not everybody can have the high performance by definition. So go on then, summarize that for me. Where does that take us? Right?
Everyone says they want high performers and they want a team of high performers and an organization worth of high performers. But A, would they know a high performer if they saw them? B, it's really subjective. What is a high performer? We'll all have a different view of high performers.
And actually, sorry, let me add on there. And C,
Yeah, come on.
if you are reliant on high performers for your business to perform, you've got a very unstable business.
You have. And I think in discussing it, we came to the conclusion is that you don't want a team of high performers. You want a high performing team, which is a completely different thing. And we did a fantastic couple of episodes with Alana Friedman. So we will put the links to those episodes in the show notes. Check those out.
Another point is, the minute you start talking about your high performers, you're also dooming people to be low performers, which by definition they will be because it's a self-fulfilling fantasy. So is that really helping you?
Yeah, and you want to avoid the entitlement that high performers sometimes build up and then disenfranchising your theoretically lower performers, because that's never going to get you the best overall outcomes.
So do you know where this takes us?
Where does it
It's
take
all
us?
about the system, mate, not the people. And on that note, I think I'm going to declare victory and go.
If that's what you want to play the game, James, if that makes you feel like you're a high performer today,
Brilliant.
you do that. All right. Thanks, everyone.
We cover a whole host of topics on this podcast,
from purpose to corporate jargon.
but always focused on one thing: getting the job done well.
Easier said than done. So if you've got unhappy customers or employees, bosses or regulators breathing down your neck,
If your backlogs are out of control and your costs are spiralling, and that big IT transformation project that you've been promised just keeps failing to deliver,
we can help. If you need to improve your performance, your team's performance, or your organisation's, get in touch at jimmy@ajobdonewell.com.
or James@jobdonewell.com.